Welcome to Everything Life Coaching, exploring the art, science, and business of coaching with your host, Noelle Cordeaux, CEO of Lumia. Each week, we dive into cutting-edge coaching trends, interview industry experts, and provide practical insights to help you thrive on your coaching journey. Get ready to expand your coaching toolkit and transform lives, including your own.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I am Noelle Cordeaux, your host. And Tim, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. We've been having a great conversation, and I said, hey, we need to hit record here.
We have, yeah. My name's Tim Brownson. I own the Fully Booked Coach. I've been a coach for just past my 20th year in May. And for the first 10 years, I was a life coach. And then I started working with more and more coaches. Then I started the Fully Booked Coach. It was originally called Coach Life Coaching in 2012. And that's what I've been doing for the last, 13 years now.
Awesome. And Tim and I have been unlikely friends over the years. We've met each other across oceans, and we've kind of really aligned in a lot of the different ways that we see the world. And very recently, Tim joined us over at Lumia Coaching to deliver a really impactful talk about the way that AI is shaping the landscape of coaching. But today, we've begun to talk about the role of authenticity, honesty, and vulnerability in how we can help people, help coaches shape a path forward. Because we're in this weird time where humans are having a hard time telling what's real and what's not. So how do we position ourselves with tools, with knowledge, with staying power to move forward? Tim, what have you seen as some successes out there?
Some successes. Oh, you've dropped that one on me. I'll tell you who I see as a real success, and that's Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, that is known as now, and he's one of these guys. I've known him for a long time, since he actually commented on my blog, and I'm going to go back to about 2007 when he had Wine Library TV, and the guy's just dead authentic. I know there are people that dislike him, and but he's him. I bet if you met him for a beer or a coffee or whatever, he would be the exact same person as you see on all the shorts. He's got a huge 9-figure media company behind him now, various other interests, but I bet you he's the same person. You can just tell he is. And I like to think if people meet me, they'll walk away thinking, oh, God, he's exactly like I thought he would be. He's no better when I met him in person. What a disappointment. So, I would point to him. This won't gel with a lot of people, but I actually think Tony Robbins is a bit like, especially when I saw him on I Am Not the Guru. And there's a lot of he does that I don't like. But I think he's kind of genuine. Whether your face has changed, I just feel like, whoa! I wasn't sure if you'd frozen. It's like, not Tony Robbins, and I've got mixed feelings on the guy, and I don't like some of his marketing tactics at all. But let's move right along.
The way they show up, right? So I actually agree with you. I think that those two are examples of folks who have built their brands into a reflection of who they really are. One of the things that I've been reflecting on is there was a certain tipping point for me when I stopped giving a fuck. And I started doing my podcasts or my community events with no makeup on. Wherever I happened to be, the one of the most impactful ones I did, I was staying with a dear friend of mine, and I was minding her little 3-month-old baby, and there was a crib behind me in the background. And I said to, one of my team members, what do you think of this? And she just said in response, this is life, Noelle. This is who you are. This is authentic. And it's true in terms of like that you have to move into a space personally where you're comfortable showing yourself in a real way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I'm aware that I'm I was going to say middle-aged then. I've left middle-age behind. Yeah, I'm an old white dude. I say I'm more like an oil spill than an oil paint. I'm aware of what I look like, but you'll still see me all over my website. And I don't like having my photo taken, but I know I have to do it because that's how we connect with people. And it's that authenticity. Look, this is who I am. I'm not going to put this through an AI filter, and because I it's crushing when somebody, well, it would be. I've never done it. If somebody saw you, they were like, "Oh God, dude, you've really let yourself go, or you've been using some serious AI skills on the photos on your website." I don't really want that. But going back to what you said about the not giving a fuck, the first time for me was I was starring out all my swear words on my blog. And that was probably, I started blogging end of 2006. So probably, I don't know, I've been doing it a year. And suddenly I thought, this is just ridiculous. I wouldn't, I get, you've got to do it on LinkedIn, otherwise it's not going to spread. You've got to do it on a book cover, or otherwise it's not going to go on Amazon, etc. But for me, it was like, okay, well, I want to attract people to work with me that don't necessarily use the language the same as I do. That's absolutely fine, but aren't going to be offended by it. They're not going, because they're not good clients for me. So it's fine.
I mean, I think you bring up a really great point around the implicit relational aspect of what it means to have a client. This isn't a product. Like when you're selling yourself and you're selling your services, on the other end is a real live human that you as a coach need to have a relationship, and that person needs to have a relationship with you. And that relationship transcends marketing, frankly. If everybody doesn't feel good, it's not going to be a trusted relationship. It's not going to be a generative relationship, and you're not going to be able to get any work done because people aren't going to be honest with each other. So I guess as I'm hearing you, showing ourselves in a way that exposes who we really are is the best way to set coach and client up for success.
Yeah, I definitely think. I mean, it's a partnership. You've got to, and this is. I'm not sure that there's many businesses like that. But as a coach, you've got to like your client. I don't think, or I feel like I do every now and then. I'll work with a client. You know what? There's things that maybe I didn't pick up on in a consult, because now I'll pick up on it usually in a consult, or they won't contact me in the first place because they don't like me, which is absolutely fine. But if I'm really pulling for my clients, that makes it so much more, like the relationship so much tighter. And yet, I don't think you can fake that. Maybe some people can, maybe Dustin Hoffman could, some method actor or whatever could fake really liking somebody. But I don't think you can do, as human beings, we're fairly attuned to things like that, I think, anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. And then there's the balance between who you are, your story, certain things about you, and then also being a competent professional. So what's that like for you, especially from a marketing perspective? How can we kind of give folks a primer on, okay, what's it like in real life to wake up and express to an audience that you're competent, you know what you're doing, and you're a real human, and you like yourself, and you think you're pretty funny?
Right. I don't know if you're describing what I think of me then, but that, oh, you, right. Oh, okay. Well, I think it's going to be different for everybody. So I can only really describe how I do it. And that comes back to the fact that it's got to be authentic to you. Now, I'm not saying, we spoke about this before, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't push yourself out of your comfort zone. You absolutely should from time to time. That hesitancy or that sort of discomfort or slight anxiety before you hit publish on a blog post because you're telling people about who you are as a person, that's perfectly natural, and I think you should be doing that. but with me, so in terms of separating that from the professionalism. So, for example, in all my copy, I may swear and I may mention, I may go all anti-Trump for a minute, but I'll tie it in. There'll be a reason behind it. It's not just a rant. If it is a rant, and it has happened on occasions, not very often, but my readers will tell me that just read like a rant. It happened about a year, 18 months ago, I think. So, for me, it's about, well, what's the purpose? How does this help me as a coach? And adding value, and constantly adding value. And, I just shared recently in the last couple of weeks, I started a circle community about not even 18 months ago, May of last year, and I ran it until end of June, and I pulled the plug on it because it was too much work for the return on it. And so I went back to my readers and said, look, this failed. I want to tell you why it failed. It's, I hadn't got the time. I didn't want to devote the time. I think is as much my problem sometimes. And I think that as well, when you're not trying to, put yourself on a pedestal all the time, to admit that, well, yeah, I've fucked up loads of times. I started doing a podcast I didn't even start. I bought all the equipment and then took it back in 2008 because I couldn't get it to work with a Mac. So we all make mistakes, and that's fine. And I think it's honest, isn't it? Really, it's just being honest. You don't need to be, radically honest. You don't need to get ridiculous, but I think it's important. And you shouldn't really be telling people about your issues, why you're going through them. I wouldn't go on there and say, I'm having a mental breakdown. I've never had a mental breakdown of it, but I wouldn't do that. Or I've gone bankrupt. The volleyball coach has gone bankrupt. I wouldn't do.
Well, I think, Amy, you're making a great point about making a decision to reserve a certain element of your private life for your private life, but also to have a certain amount of vulnerability in order to create what would be a personal brand for yourself. And I think that piece kind of, ebbs and flows, because throughout a lifespan, there are touchstones that we all live through, that we all go through, that we can all, recognize as being part of the journey. And that self-disclosure is something that I've struggled with over the years. And I've kind of had to step back and say, well, what has been implicit in that struggle? And there's a definition that's really stuck with me recently, and it's the definition of culture. That culture, the culture around us, is a series of rules about what we can do, what we can't do, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And so if we're sitting there terrified before hitting publish on that blog post, I would bet that there's some element of the culture that we're a part of in there. That it's you're breaking one of the rules to say, I'm different in this way, or I've struggled in this way, or I've showed I'm showing myself in this way. That it's like a rule-based kind of psyche. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so you mean it, and it's different for everybody. Everybody's got their own. Yeah, no, I definitely think that. Yeah, I mean, I was not taught, but growing up as a kid, my mum was a voracious learner and reader, and she'd always be going and looking things up, and I modelled on it. So I did this. So that for me is just how I do things. If I don't know something, I have to go and find out. But my wife was brought up in a different kind of household where she was expected to know things. So she's kind of more resistant, even though she's got a doctorate of nursing. She'll do it for that. With other things, she's not quite as likely to go and look for answers. So yeah, I think again that's a culture. For her to say I don't know this, her father would not have been very accepted of that. He'd have expected her to know it. So I suppose that's part of our culture, and it is when you've got that. I think sometimes I underestimate how hard it is for people. I'm just thinking, well, just go and read it. Go and listen to a podcast. How hard is it? I listen to 2 or 3 hours a day. Why don't you go and do it? But it is hard for some. And so, yeah, I can get that for sure.
Yeah, I think it, and as we're kind of thinking about like how this all plays in for coaches, it comes down to the question of you're putting yourself out there in one way or another. What do you want to be known for? And that piece needs to have some teeth to it. There needs to be a legitimate amount of learning. There needs to be a legitimate amount of expertise. There needs to be authenticity. There needs to be vulnerability. And that's a hard question to answer, juxtaposed against this weird world of culture, especially, and I am somebody who is admittedly not online. I'm not on my computer, I'm not on my phone. And so like even when people in my life talk about TikTok, I have no idea. That's a whole element of culture that I have no exposure to. I have no point of reference for. What do you see how does the culture of online society impact individuals and your clients?
Well, I think it's, my answer to that is probably going to be predictable, but I think it's the expectations it puts on people. Especially women. It's a lot worse for women than it is men. That, that you said the first time you went on a recorded podcast with no makeup on. Well, that's a big deal. Not for me. I've no problem with that. But for I mean, for me, not wearing makeup. But for some women, my wife wouldn't do that. She would never do that. That would be gut wrenchingly difficult for her. So I think it's this expectation. And also there's a thing about, a lot of coaches see what other coaches are doing and they copy them, not realizing often they're replicating a failing model. Because it's very easy to go online and say, yeah, I'm super successful and have all good news stories and pictures of you. Well, mine are all pictures of me smiling pretty much. But, it's easy to do that. It's hard to say, when you fucked up with something. I think there's that, or I don't share that element of me, the part of me that isn't quite so successful.
There was a paradigm shift along the way. At first, I cared very much about being in makeup. It was agonizing for me every time I had to get on video. Just emotionally, I have a history of eating disorders and body dysmorphia. I'm 45 years old. And there was a certain point at which I had to internalize that my job as a coach, my job as a CEO is my job, but my life is my life. And I was going to take my job with me as I lived my life, not the reverse. And that was the point at which I decided however I show up, I show up based on what is happening in my life. And I think thinking back to that question of, who would we hold up as successful coaches? One of the things that I've been thinking about deeply in this time, because shit is so weird out there in the world, and there are so many tragedies, and there's so much grief, and there's so much pain and fear, and everybody's just really coming unglued at the seams, is redefining success for coaches. Because holding up Gary Vee or Tony Robbins, if I'm thinking about myself, 45 on, I wouldn't want to be either of those two. I wouldn't. What I want is I want to see my parents. I want to see my friends. I want to eat good food. I want to hang out with my old dog. I want to live comfortably. I don't want to acquire. I want to be able to flow through my life. And that's going to take a lot less striving and a lot less optimization than the capitalist marketplace calls for. But my version of success is ample rest, ample ease, and ample socialization. And so that's one of the ways where I think coaches can really begin looking at the opportunity of freedom that they have to kind of co-construct along with the market where they go and what they do. What are your North Stars?
Well, I think success is a very personal thing, but too many people define success based on external things rather than internal things. So there isn't that internal locus of control that this is important to me. So I'm very much the same as you. So I'm out at 7 o'clock every morning with the dogs for an hour and a half. If you want to book me for an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can't. And it's not because I'm still in bed. It's because I'm on the moors with the dogs, and that's what I do, and that's what they expect. And they own me. And the same thing in the afternoon. I won't take more than two clients between two, or won't take a client between 2 and 4 o'clock because I go out with the dogs. So there's that, and to me, that makes me feel successful when I'm doing that. It's like, well, what else? I mean, I'm with you on the materialistic stuff, apart from my Mac stuff, my Apple stuff. Okay, that doesn't count. I've got to have 2 laptops and a knife, and that's. But other than that, I'm actually not very materialistic. And we spend all our money on good food and we went to Italy in May. We're going to Budapest in September. We're looking at going somewhere because it's our 30th wedding anniversary next year. Going to Thailand, maybe, so things like that, experiences, because they're, the great scheme of things, they're far more important than just acquiring wealth. And that's one of the things I think, with what's happening in the world now, it's this massive acquisition of wealth that is just really disturbing for me. Don't let me go down there.
We're not going to go down there. We'll nip it here. But, and so it's, thinking about quality content and like, why are we delivering this message, right? So for me, it's saying, okay, I've been coaching for almost 18 years, and you and I are both 2 weirdo humans that have been able to build a life using Apple products, frankly, and and live well, and have figured out that a lot of the big bells and whistles and pressure and presentation and thumbnails and pitches, like, it really doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, showing up and doing a good job as yourself sets you apart.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I suppose another definition to success is, are you happy? Because if you're happy, how can you not be successful if you're happy all the time? Even if you're, doing the most menial job, but you're enjoying doing it and you're going through life and you're content with what you've got. And I think, there's something you said there that made me think about this, which is, coaches freak out. And I know I'm slightly going off topic, but bear with me, about when they go about forming a niche, because it's like they're cutting people out. But, it's how many clients do you need? How many clients does any one coach need? It's an incredibly small amount. To me, it's about 25 a year. So I can afford to just, target those people and aim at those. So I don't have to worry. I can go on to Reddit and just get into petty arguments if I want to. I can just observe on Twitter, on X. I've still got about 4.5. I never post, but just watch stuff. So I can do the kind of things I want to do because I'm not worried about that. I'll just focus my efforts on what bring my clients. And then the rest of the time, it's not work and I'm just enjoying myself. And I think too many coaches, they pile pressure on themselves. I get it. If you've got to earn money, you've got to pay the bills. But it can be enjoyable, this ride. And we prove it. So it absolutely can.
We prove it. Have you ever used partnerships in your practice? Have you ever partnered with other companies or organizations?
I haven't. Maybe a couple of smaller ones way back in 2007, 2008. No, but I would absolutely encourage new coaches to do for sure. Yeah, it's anytime you can borrow other people's audience. What am I doing now talking to you? Other than I would talk to you for pleasure anyway, but it's, get in front of your audience, just like, I do in front of my audience. So Yeah, I think JV's a good idea for a coach to sort of build up the business quicker than they would just trying to do everything on their own.
So distilling it down, like I like that number 25. And I think, and because I see the same thing in Lumia, a lot of, especially within the first 5 or 6 classes, everybody's freaking out about what is my niche going to be? Um, who am I going to be when I grow up? How is it going to work? But if we're really kind of keeping that number of 25 in our heads, like what does it take for one human with modest resources to maintain a roster of 25 clients, right? And that can come from all sorts of different creative outlets. I often repeat your advice that a newsletter is one of the best ways to really, introduce yourself to your audience. Of all of your lead magnets, what's your most effective?
Newsletter, yeah. Well, I mean, it's difficult to tell because I've been pretty successful with SEO over the years, and sometimes it's hard to attribute where people have come from. So if somebody found me through SEO 4 years ago and then he's on my newsletter list, has been on since, and then they're going to hire me, they probably won't know where they found me originally. I will ask everybody that I work with. So it is tricky to know, but head and shoulders above everything is my newsletter list. In some way, shape, or form, probably, 70%, I would have said, and the majority of the others. Reddit is good for me, even though I had no strategy when I went onto Reddit. I just went on Reddit and I know it sounds ridiculous, but I went on to help people. I found a couple of threads. I'm just like, no, I'll just dive in there. And I just got into doing that. And I've had 6 clients from Reddit in the last year without really putting that much effort into it. But newsletter, because, the newsletter, you own the list. I mean, yeah, people can unsubscribe, but if my newsletter, Mark Zuckerberg can't impact anything I do with my newsletter, but he can shut your business down if you're based on Facebook. And the same goes for, the different platforms, Musk with X and what have you. So I prefer to have control of that. If I've got a launch to do, which I don't launch very often, probably only less than once a year on average, I'm pretty much certain I can sell out to my list because I've built a list of people that trust me. I'm very low on subscribes, almost no spam complaints. I get about 2 a year. It really hurts me. That's the only thing that bothers me these days. I always have to go, why is this spam? Especially when I go and look and they've been on my list for 2 years. It's like, well, why is this one spam and not all the others? But other than that, it doesn't bother me.
So 25 a year, and you're saying, all right, 6 come from Reddit, which anybody can hop on any social media platform and just start being helpful. And then you have a big launch once a year. And that's where the other 20 or so come from?
Oh, no. The launch would be if I did like some group coaching or a mastermind. So I'm going to do a mastermind starting in September. I might even run 2. So then I'll do a launch. So I did some group coaching in first half of 2023. So I don't ever launch my coaching. I don't really need to at this point. I mention it, and there's a banner at the bottom of my email, but I don't need to launch that. The other place that I get clients is I've had a couple from the podcast I did with you years ago, actually. The thing about podcasts is they have a really long shelf life. So I found this podcast called Philosophize This, which is just about philosophy. I liked it so much. I've gone back to 2013 and I'm going back to because I'm, really started fascinating me and I'm working my way. It's going to take me about a year, I figured out, to catch up. But people do that with podcasts if it's valuable. So podcasts I do okay with that. LinkedIn 3 or 4 a year maybe. Thinking about it, LinkedIn's not a very good return for the effort I put in compared to Reddit. And Facebook's died a death. I've got 6,700 people in one Facebook group, 2,000 in another. I can't remember the last time I got a client from Facebook.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to the two of us, something that's coming up for me is that both of us have spent a really long time creating useful content, whether it's in a podcast. So when you think about your newsletter, how do you decide what you're going to put in it from month to month in order to engage and maintain your audience?
Right. So if everybody listening to this could not do as I do, because I'm about to be an appalling example. This is like the parent drinking in front of the child and telling them not to drink, because I do it on the hoof. I do it all on the hoof. I wake up, I have an idea, I'm listening to a podcast, think, oh yeah, clients have have emailed me and said, was I the inspiration for that post? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talked about this and I said something that I thought had value, or you said something that I thought would be useful, and I'll then talk about it or go deeper with it. So what happens with that is I can send 3 emails out one week, and then I may go a week without sending one out because I don't feel I've got anything value, and I just don't like queuing content. Part of that reason is because I'll often talk about stuff in the news, so you can't do that. And the other reason is I'm just so excited when I've written something that I want to share it. Honestly, I know it's ridiculous. You think after this long that you wouldn't still get excited at the publish button or the send button, but I absolutely do, and I just want to get it out there and start looking at the feedback from it. So, but for a new coach, I'd say, look, start. I don't tell my clients to do what I do. And there's a benefit to having done this for so long as well. I know that things are going to crop up, and my list sort of expect what they get. So it would be having a content calendar. And if any coach has got a client journey, meaning the internal client journey that they take clients through, sort of like a framework that I have, then I will be looking to rotate the contents and talk about those. And also just making sure, reminding yourself, tell personal stories. It's no good just telling people how to do something, because everybody's figuring out ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini can tell them how to do stuff, and you're gonna lose touch with people if it's just a how to. That instructional stuff is gone now.
Yeah, and that's such I think that's one of the places where I'm starting to shift. So for the longest time, I didn't want to share too much of myself personally. I wanted to do the how-to. I wanted to show the life coaching techniques and really highlight what coaching is. And recently, like very recently, maybe last month, I wrote my first piece to be published on the national stage that actually talks about my story, how I became a coach, how I overcame eating disorders, how I went through my first divorce and found positive psychology because I was so bloody unhappy and where I was in my 20s. And I think when I was listening to you, one of the things that I heard is that you're practiced in this. You're practiced in kind of like writing and sending it out. Over the years, I got really good at talking, but not so good at writing in long form or written form. And so when I need to sit down and write, it jacks me up because I get nervous, I get self-conscious. It's like a big thing in my head. I could talk all day long. So what would you say for like me, who gets like a little bit of writer's block? I want to move into a more personal narrative. I know I'm good at talking.
I could be really glib and say, just do it, suck it up, come on, yeah, go you. Well, I think obviously, writer's block and having that anxiety about putting stuff out there, and writer's block, probably I'd say 2 different approaches. Writer's block, I just get yourself on AI. I mean, I use AI very little for writing. My sense of humor, it can't pick up on an English style of writing. My style of writing as well, it is self-taught. It's not very sort of correct grammatically, and I use all sorts of unusual quirks. But for most people, get on ChatGPT and tell it, what's in your head. Just dump what's in your head in there, or talk to it if you prefer to do that, and see what it comes back with. Because most writers that I've ever spoken to and I've ever read about, and including myself, with writer's block, it's the empty page, isn't it? Once you get going, even if you got page full of utter bollocks is better than having nothing, and you may end up with none of that, but it gets you going. In terms of, I mean, how I would have dealt with that when I was life coaching, I would have probably been pulling out the NLP or hypnosis, to be honest, and trying to use that. But I wouldn't take, if somebody came to me now and said, that is my issue, is anxiety about doing this, I'd just say, yeah, that's not the right fit for me, unless that's like 2% of it and the rest of it is the marketing and getting like client stuff. And I think, sometimes with people, and I'm quite different when I'm coaching to how I appear to people on social media. I'm a lot more kid glovish and reacting to clients and coaching them how they want to be. But one of the questions or a couple of questions I asked on my intake form is, what's going to motivate you? What's going to demotivate you? And I think it's important to look at that. If somebody says that you're telling them what to do is going to demotivate them, then don't do it, because you've got to keep them motivated. But some people just do want that gentle push. And I don't know about most people, but a lot of people are much better at keeping promises to somebody else, especially if they've paid that person, than they are to themselves. So if a client promises me they'll do something, not very often they don't do it, even if they admit that it's making them feel uncomfortable. So I think that accountability to other people can be important as well.
Yeah. I've been thinking about starting a newsletter for myself. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it for months. For months. But I'll do a podcast, I'll do a video, I'll write an article for a magazine, I'll put together, thoughts and projections for other businesses, and I just keep getting in my own way.
Well, I mean, you could, obviously with transcription services now, you could just, what I'm surprised at, and I've thought this a few times, that there isn't, and maybe there is, I've just not seen it, there isn't like a newsletter service where you could just send out an audio file, because audio files can be, compressed quite a lot. I'm not sure whether it would still be too big, and you could listen to somebody. And I know there's devices where it can AI it. Because I like I have quick ideas that I want to share with people. And my typing is just diabolical, and get me on a phone, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Honestly, sometimes I look back, I have no idea what that is. Even spell check or autocorrect, I have no clue, dude. You're on your own. So to be able to do that would be super cool. So I'd say, start with that, and then just, edit out the really, if there's any hideous bits or bits where you're umming and ahhing like I do all the time, and you should be good to go, and just say, okay, maybe say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to send it out. I'm going to send out one a day. I did a 30-day challenge for videos a couple of years ago. And once I committed to my people, I'm going to do one a day, a short for YouTube. I did it. So maybe you need to commit to your people that you're going to send out an email a day for a week, and you're just going to record them on your phone and then transcribe them.
Transcribe it. And so, what we're highlighting here is, it's not going to be fancy. It's not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be weird. It's going to be the inside of my head, but it is doable. And that, and so I'd invite everybody to kind of follow along and see what it's like when I start doing my little self-publishing stuff, and see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the inside of everybody's head's weird. If you want to look really smart in front of people, you just say something to them like, I bet you've got a lot more potential than you've ever realized. And I bet you've got, your voice is going all the time. It's like, that's everybody. That's just, if you don't think your voice is going, just try and meditate in silence for a couple of minutes. You'll soon find out what's going on up there. And everybody thinks they're more weird than the next person. Like, yeah, but shit, I really am weird, but the reality of it is there's only one weirdest person on the planet, and it's probably not you. So, get it out there. And people are also very, if people have got issues, like, for example, you talked about the food issues, that I bet you any money that the vast majority of people were supportive when they found out. It's because people just are. Most people are nice when they're in when you've got adversity.
And it doesn't, the other thing is, like, it doesn't matter. And that's like, when we get so tripped up with fear, like, when I talk about my own lived experience, the only person that actually matters to is me, or somebody else find validation or inspiration in my story. And so it doesn't hurt anybody to put it out there. It's of no consequence to anybody but me to put it out there. And so, it's kind of rolling with it is forming that story of what do we want to be known for? How do we want to be known? And the reason that I wrote about it is because I wanted to show some humanity. I don't think that I'm uncommon at 45 years old to be divorced and have had some junk with eating disorders in my past. I think that's a huge swath of the population, and I'm a very visible, successful person. And so I also wanted to show, hey, there are some chinks in the armor along the way, and that's normal.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we give people either directly or indirectly permission to be honest about themselves as well, to talk to it when we do it. Yeah, something that frustrates me. So in the soccer in the UK, so the Premier League in the UK is the biggest league in the world, and there are zero out gay players in the Premier League. Yeah, in the Women's Super League, there's a bunch. I don't know, a very, very high percentage. And that's because, if one superstar, because there must be one who's gay. I mean, it's just inconceivable, it isn't. One came out and just said, then that will give permission for everybody else to say, oh, phew, I can be myself. So when we're doing this, what our problems, somebody else has been dealing with the same problems as well. And when we talk about ours, it's like, oh, thank God for that. I'm not on my own. There's other people that are nuts as well.
Yes, indeed. All right. Let's craft some final thoughts for the humans that we love and that we want to support in this work moving forward, because we've covered it all. Authenticity, newsletters, lions, tigers, and bears. So people who listen to this podcast are people who are thinking about becoming a coach. They're people who are coaches. Maybe they're in coach training, or they're using this podcast as a companion. Thinking about those folks, what do you want to leave them with?
I would say to any new coach is just avoid the noise. You're going to hear a shit ton of negativity, and some of it's justified because it's hard to be a coach, but most coaches don't succeed. But that's because most coaches don't learn marketing and they don't put as much effort into running their coaching practices as they do into becoming a great coach. Nobody ever quits coaching. I've never heard anybody who quit coaching say, just wasn't very good at it. I've never. It's always, I couldn't get clients. So it's really knuckling down and putting the work into that, because it's just as important as being a good coach, because a good marketer will always attract clients, but a great coach won't if they can't market. The whole word of mouth is, unless you're in a very, very specialized niche, is much more difficult. So I'd say, focus on that and just try and ignore the noise and the naysayers that you're going to encounter.
Yeah, I think for me, the most impactful part of our conversation was your number 25, that you need 25 humans to have a successful year. And in the scheme of things, in terms of the reach that's possible with podcasts, newsletters, internet, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, 25 is not a big number. And that it is, with the right tactics, accessible.
Yeah, of course it is. It is. It's still not, it's still not easy. You've still got to do the right things, but it isn't. It's when you break it down, and not many clients break down how many, I was going to say how many times the phone needs something like anybody calls anybody these days, but how many contacts you need to make in a month. And it's going to be a surprisingly small amount. And then you can start to focus, okay, well, what do I need to do to that? And forget everybody else. You maybe can coach anybody, but you can't market to everybody. Just zone in on the people who are like you. And
Awesome. Tim, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. I had fun hanging out today. And you should be getting out with your dogs this afternoon, eh?
Well, she's gone to lay down now. She's coming to nudge me to go out.
That's fair. And I have my old dog to get outside too. So we'll sign off for today, but it's been an absolute pleasure. And Tim, where can folks find you? We'll put it in the show notes.
Oh, thefullybookedcoach.com.
Fullybookedcoach.com. All right, friend. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If today's episode has inspired you to take the next step in your coaching journey, I invite you to explore what Lumia Coach Training has to offer. Our comprehensive coach training program can help you turn your passion and gifts for helping others into a thriving career. Ready to learn more? Book a no-obligation call with our admissions team today. Just visit lumiacoaching.com/everything and click on the Book a Call button. We'd love to hear your story and show you how Lumia can support your coaching goals. And if you're waiting for a sign to take the next step, this is it.